This is the Baymont Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are back with the Chosen to watch as the disciples are commissioned as apostles and sent out in pairs.
It's a good episode with some good moments in it. I remember thinking, man, this is it's one of those episodes that's like almost all backstory. And right about when I was thinking to myself, this is all backstory, there's no biblical text, all of a sudden, towards the end middle, Jesus sends out the 12 and it's quoting all kinds of text. And so there it's in there.
Yeah. And this episode was 70 minutes long.
Yeah.
I also noticed that the season 3 finale is 100 minutes long. And I was like, oh, well, maybe their solution to fitting all this stuff into 7 seasons is just to make more and more episodes that are feature length.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that stuff, especially the finale, is the long credit roll at the end with the donors and the...
Yeah, I don't know if the runtime counts that or not. That's I think that's about 10 minutes. But that's still a tight 90.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a solid movie right there.
Yep.
But yeah, there's lots of text in this that we'll kind of get into. So maybe we should just dive right in, Marty.
Blow that horn.
All right. So we start off with Gaius and Atticus discussing the tents that are slowly expanding the city unofficially. And then, we'll see later Quintus seeks to do that expansion more officially for tax purposes, but they're trying to figure this out, and it's kind of a weird relationship between Gaius and Atticus because Gaius keeps talking to him as a superior officer, as somebody who has some kind of authority over him, and I don't really understand how he has any authority over Gaius.
Yeah, so Atticus is cohortes, I think they call him, which means he's like Secret Service. That may not be the reference. He works for the hand of Caesar.
No, that's right. We looked that up at some point. It was cohortes urbanae or something like that.
Yep.
I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, there you go. And he basically does. He's going to work directly for Caesar. So in a lot of ways, he's not in the same part of the flow chart, but he, in a lot of ways, outranks, even Quintus. In the next scene, we see, one of the next few scenes, we see him even talk to Quintus as though he has superior authority.
Yeah, Quintus is interesting because every time he makes a reference to Caesar, he does some sort of praise be him or something.
Yep.
And it seems like, I don't know, I don't remember if Gaius did or not, but I know Atticus definitely made some references to Caesar, but he wouldn't say anything so directly that he tied himself into having to say that. I don't know. It was kind of weird. I don't know if Quintus is just being overly... I mean, I guess if Atticus does have some authority over Quintus, Quintus is going to be on his best behavior.
Yep, and that's the flex that's being done there all the time. Is again not in the same river of the flow chart, but the whole time he has to keep remembering, hey, remember who I work for. Yeah. Remember who I represent. Remember who I speak to. At the end of the scene in question, he'll reference about how he has to go spend some time with Pilate. Because he's now the governor. He's going to even be over. So he keeps making these references remember, I spend time with all of your bosses.
Yeah. Quintus definitely squirms at that.
Yeah.
At that line about going to Pilate. The other thing interesting that Gaius said in that conversation with Quintus is he referenced Jesus' sermon being on the Chorazin Plateau.
Uh-huh.
Is that the same thing as a Ramos Tapos, or is that a...
Probably, yeah. I mean, it would probably be a reference to what sits behind Chorazin. Going to be more up on top, kind of behind everything rather than a Ramos Tapos. But yeah, I mean, that's also another popular place where a lot of people think that could have happened. So I would say it's one of the top 3 locations that people talk about. So yeah.
Yeah. So later in the night, we see Z and Nathaniel are walking around the tents trying to keep order, and Z is being a little zealous, if you will, about enforcing the fire code. And Nathaniel's like, dude, you gotta pick your battles. There's nothing we can do about this, really. There's too many people. They're what do you expect them to do?
I found the whole camp. That's going to play a big part in season 3. This camp that's growing outside of. I mean, that'll be a huge cog in the story. I find the whole thing to be so Interesting. Not that it's not historically plausible. Such an interesting take. Feels a little arbitrary, maybe not. I don't mind it. It plays such a prominent role. This huge crowd gathering to set up tents in a temporary. And I mean, we're told about crowds gathering. I never really thought about whether or not they were lodging. I think I've always supposed they were more local crowds that were coming from the local residents, but it's an interesting take. It's just going to play such a dominant part of the storyline, but interesting. And then how they are able to weave that into the Roman socio-political context and the dynamic there between Rome and the people and the ministry of Jesus. It was just an interesting part of season 3.
And, I think Rome's concern is somewhat valid in that at the end of that opening scene, we see some zealots who are paying attention to what Z's doing.
Yep.
Or, I mean, I don't know if they're paying attention necessarily. I mean, I think we find out later, but they're there either way.
Yep.
And who, like when Atticus talks to Z later on that rooftop, he's like, so what, what are you guys doing here? What's the purpose of all this? What do you expect to happen?
Right.
Like, these guys are going to do something.
Yep.
They're not going to stop. So either you got to stop them or I got to stop them.
Yep.
But they look at you as a traitor now. So whatever, it's all complicated.
Yep. And not only that element, but it is going to put a strain on the local infrastructure. They're already starting to talk about in this episode, the bad water that's going to play out for a few more episodes as well. But I mean, just all the people having a pretty big effect, whether it's the threat and the danger of what can't be controlled, or just that amount of people and what it does to, just the civil infrastructure of things like water systems and everything. It would be if that's the case, it would be a thing.
So this is set in, is it Capernaum?
Yes.
Is that where they are?
Yep.
So not a Decapolis city, not a
no
Roman city at all. So
nope.
It just it seems weird that the infrastructure would be as developed.
And really that's the point, is it's not. Like, there's one.
Oh yeah, I guess
there's going to be one key cistern connected to the synagogue. So
right,
pretty which I want to say all kinds of stuff about, but I'll be getting ahead of myself into later episodes, so I'm just going to stop myself.
Okay, well we'll definitely get back to it, because it is a theme. So then we get into the credits. So coming from there, Matthew's sitting with his parents. His mom's concerned for his health. She's like, "Have you been eating enough? How have you been sleeping outside?" Blah blah blah. They're surprised when Matthew refers to Philip as a friend, but ultimately in the scene, and man, these reconciliation themes, Marty, they are hitting me pretty hard.
I knew as I watched it today, I was like, "Oh, I bet this one got Brent right in the feels."
Man, and I don't know why that is necessarily, but Matthew just it's awkward, but he works his way through the reconciliation. He confesses all these things, and then I loved this little detail, is Alpheus offers Matthew some food.
Yep.
And they don't actually go through the meal, but I just love that hey, I'm going to give you food. We're going to eat together.
Yep.
And they don't, it's another one of those things where they don't make a big deal about it. You don't even think about it if you don't know that context.
Yeah. And we, two notes I have on that repentance scene is he's not just this was not quick repentance. And it's not just because Matthew's this quirky dude with all of this, awkward anxiety. It's we've talked before about the Jewish, the Jewish process of repentance, and how there are multiple steps, and you don't just acknowledge that you've done something wrong, but you talk about the impact that it's had and the way that it's hurt people, and then you make restitution. You see all of those elements in what Matthew's doing. He's not just out of this sense of guilt and shame trying to get a quick apology off his chest and look for forgiveness. He is thoroughly grappling with, in front of the people he's offended, what he did and the impact it has, and he's wanting to make restitution. And like, I liked that. And the other note I have is that I feel like in the typical Jewish setting, that could have easily been very covenantal, very, I don't want to say contractual, but very transactional. Like they could have just talked about the details. I think that would have been very normal in that culture then, maybe even in that culture now. But in Jesus, I feel like the way it's being depicted, I don't know how intentional this is on the part of the writers, but it's more relational. It's more emotional. Like they're connecting as people. Like you can see heart, not just transaction, not just apology, not just doing, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean doing the right things, but you can do the right things and never really connect on a heart level. And these conversations, these interactions are relational interactions, they're emotional interactions. And I think that's part of the person of Jesus, his character, the character being portrayed in the show, like part of him, part of what he's teaching this group of people, part of what he embodies, part of his love that has been made incarnate, like coming out in his followers. And I liked that part too. That was my other note I had from that scene.
Yeah. So beautiful to see that. And yeah, it isn't, I like that. Obviously I think this would play out in real life. This would play out over days, months, years.
Sure.
Like it's going to take a while to heal all those things, but I like that they spent a substantial amount of time in this episode on that conversation. It wasn't just like a quick fix.
Yep.
And like, oh, we're just going to, go back to normal now.
Yep.
Like even at the end of the conversation, his mom makes Matthew refer to her as Ema, makes Alphaeus get up and address Matthew, and forgive him like with those direct words.
Yep.
And then makes Matthew refer to him as Abba. And like, it's still hard. Like it still feels weird.
Yep.
But they're working on it.
Yep. Absolutely.
So then this is where we have that conversation with Gaius and Atticus and Quintus, and they walk in and Quintus is very upset about the sewage and the water supply. I think who wouldn't be? But Quintus, after hearing about the tents, just wants to get rid of the whole thing. And Atticus is like, well, maybe you could like redraw the city boundaries and tax them. And, they're not paying taxes where they're supposed to. And they're not on your census. That's going to make your numbers look really good. So I think Quintus is on board with that idea, but also just a little uncomfortable about having Atticus around in general.
Yeah.
In his operation. And, we kind of talked about half of that scene already. So couple of quick things after that. Zebedee is sharing his olive oil. He's been working on his olive press and doing that, and apparently makes a good batch this time. And then Thomas goes on and shares his intentions to marry Rama, and everybody's excited about that. Then we see Simon and Eden trying to spend some time together. And
well, going back to Thomas, I liked the attention to detail about the family connections. He has no father. He has no patriarchal ancestry to do the arrangement. And then there's immediate connection to Jesus as rabbi. And I thought that, socially speaking, that's exactly how they, like in our world, and maybe probably even appropriately so, I don't think we would make those connections like, oh, you intend to marry a girl? Like, what does your pastor think about that? Like, that would be a relevant question, I suppose. But in the Jewish rabbinical world, like the one relationship that means just as much as his father, if his father would have been alive, or it can be a standing in place of his father, or in some Jewish perspectives, even a greater relationship of responsibility than his father is the responsibility of the rabbi. So I loved that immediate awareness in that scene. It's not just that Thomas wants to marry. They even make that point. Well, it's not you that gets to pick. Like nobody. And I love. Well, what about David and Abigail? Probably not the best example. Yeah, I love those references that they had to all of that. But there was just an awareness of how marriage worked in their culture. I liked that. It reinforced some of the things we've talked about on the podcast before. And Definitely made some positive notes there.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that was one of the things that I was thinking about was even if his father was alive, would Jesus have?
Sure, it's a good question.
Would he have been the guy to ask anyway?
Yep.
And Jesus was not surprised at all when Thomas goes to him later, and Jesus like, "Did you notice where I'm sending you?"
Yeah, right.
To do your ministry, like, finish that work and then make a stop on the way back.
Yep.
And yeah, so Jesus is totally on board. Okay, so then Simon and Eden are trying to spend some time together, and their constant struggle to do that. But I think that kind of works out. They're starting to get an understanding with the other guys, and then we see Gaius and somebody named Julius. I don't know if he's going to end up coming back, but they did give him a name. They're patrolling the tents, and Julius is trying to get some guy not to drink in public, which that seems like a weird regulation considering some of the things we see happening in the Roman Empire, like in our studies anyway. But Gaius is just like, come on, man, are you just going to make him go in the tent and then he's going to walk right back out 3 steps? Like, we do need to enforce our protocol, but let's be patient and let's be reasonable. So Gaius is definitely struggling with some like conflicted thoughts here.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are definitely some historically rooted. When one of the things that I'm trying to think, Augustus would have been dead by now, obviously. So it's going to be later emperors like let's say Octavian, Caesar Augustus. He led some really big reforms to try to bring some conservative morality back into the social life. So they set up rules about like not drinking in public, and either that was different in the land of Asia and Asia Minor, or you lifted those restrictions in the name of festival and you were trying to bring social order when it wasn't a festival time. Or
that makes sense.
I mean, there could be a lot of different things, but that was a really big part of what different emperors, and they would go back and forth. Like it kind of feels like how our American politics will waffle between conservative and progressive, and it kind of go back and forth and teeter totter. In their world, there was this: we need to clamp down, we need to bring some sense of morality, we need to, and then the next emperor would be, his platform, his campaign would be, well, we're gonna loosen up the bounds of freedom, and it was always this effort to kind of like keep social order and win social acceptance and praise. So those would have been typical kinds of laws that I think are spot on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I wasn't saying it's just like, without thinking about it ahead of time, I'm like, what?
It's definitely no Dionysian festival, we'll put it that way.
Right. But I think maybe, part of it is just like we're gonna show that we have power. We're gonna show that we have control over your life.
Yep.
To whatever detail and whatever level they want to bother with, basically.
Yep.
So then we see Z going to a well, and then he discovers the water is bad. Didn't look like a fun. I honestly don't know why he carried the bucket back after that, but whatever. So he ends up being chased by one of the other zealots, I think the same one that we saw in the tents earlier. And he climbs up on the roof, and parkour's up on the roof, really. Let's give him credit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where he's confronted by Atticus. Atticus, is still trying to figure out what Jesus is all about. Points out that Z is unarmed, and that makes him feel a little uncomfortable in that situation because he knows Atticus is armed. And then this is where they talk about, somebody's got to do something about these zealots, because they're gonna do something. They're gonna cause problems, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, I thought there was I didn't have any notes on that scene. I just have appreciated the dynamics that they're weaving together and the not ridiculous way they're writing these characters into backstory. I just really enjoy it.
So then we're back with Simon and Eden relaxing by the fireplace. Eden's kind of sharing some of her feelings, and Simon is reminding Eden that Jesus does see her, and she's like, yeah, I really remember that moment that he recognized me, spoke to me, whatever. And then Simon's like, hey, maybe it's time to add to our family. And she's pretty excited at that point. And then we jump over to Mary and Rama and Tamar, and they're discussing their financial situation. Start to get a little bit of internal tension going on here. It's kind of funny. They totally have forgotten about Joanna and that whole discussion. Like they're just moving on and trying to figure out what they're doing with their money. And they, I think it was Mary who initially suggested it, and Rama was, she's like, oh, some of this stuff isn't as important, right? But they suggest that Tamar sells some of her jewelry, and she's not excited about that idea.
She's not having that.
But Rama is talking about the olive oil, and they're like, oh yeah, olive oil, huh? Yeah. Did you hear about that from Thomas? And she's like trying to ignore what they're saying to her. And she's like, maybe we could start a business selling the oil, blah, blah, blah. And then they ultimately do have a more direct conversation about her relationship with Thomas and whether they're going to get married and what it means to be in love and how that works. And that was good. I would be curious. I don't know anything about the cultural setup for marriage and love and everything in, I think Tamar's from Ethiopia. Is that right?
I believe that's what they've said at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. That was like way back in like first couple episodes of season 1. I think that she was introduced. I'm pretty sure that's what she said at some point. But yeah, either way, like wherever she's from, they acknowledge like, oh, you're a Gentile. Like it doesn't work the same way, or they actually don't know either.
Right.
They say it might not work the same way for you as it does for us. Here's how it is. It's complicated because, my dad isn't, a follower of Jesus or anything. And Thomas's dad is no longer around, blah, blah, blah. So there's all this complication, all this stuff.
Yeah. And I liked how at one point she said in the Jewish world, love comes from marriage. We've talked about that in the podcast at some length as well. Like the order of operations is different than what we're used to, potentially even what other cultures in the ancient world were used to, like they were discussing. So, and that's not to say it's right at all. It may be just as screwed up as anything that we've experienced, but in that world, those marriages were often arranged, and then you grew to love people out of that. The love springs out of a covenant and a relationship. Whereas a lot of the things we're used to is that love starts first, and that's why you decide to enter into a covenant and a relationship. So I thought that was well spoken as far as a historical perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So then we're in the house with Jesus talking to his disciples. They're talking about the tent village. They're talking about the growing number of followers. Jesus is saying, like, we want this ministry to grow to the end of the age, he says, and the 12 have been chosen as apostles, and Jesus is going to send them out in pairs, specifically to the Jews. He says the Gentiles come in time.
I liked how he used the word apostle, and they all caught it too. And so much so that Big James is like, oh, so you're sending us, because that's what the word apostle means. Matthew then chimes in to educate him. He's like, I know that, Matthew. That's why I'm asking the question. I thought that was a good little exchange there, but the awareness, like you could see it on their faces when he said, I've chosen you as apostles. They weren't just like, oh, okay, next. They had this look on their face like, oh, we're not staying here. You're sending us somewhere.
And Jesus is like, you're going to tell people that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and you're going to perform all these miracles. And they go back and forth on that one like 3 or 4 times. They're like, okay, tell us what we're going to be doing again. Say that one more time. We're going to be doing these miracles. We're going to be healing people. Are you sure about that?
And the connection to the euangelion, I loved. And that the euangelion comes, it's not just a proclamation of an abstract idea, but that proclamation of a gospel, that euangelion comes with physical realities. Like there's going to be healing. There's going to be restoration. There's going to be shalom brought to chaos. So we're not just going to tell people a message and get people to agree to something intellectually. We're going to bring the kingdom of heaven wherever they're going. So we might even be able to link the Kingdom of Heaven, the Kingdom series that I'm doing on YouTube for anybody that might be interested. We've been diving into some of those ideas a little bit more in depth, and you'll see some of those themes. But maybe you can link the playlist or the beginning video of that in the show notes there, Brent.
Yes, I will do the whole playlist. Back to the scene, we see like the disciples sharing, more concerns. John's concerned that they aren't qualified. Andrew's concerned, like, what if we end up like John the Baptist in prison? And Jesus is like, you know, I think he appropriately addresses the weight of that moment and the weight of what he's asking them to do. And he's like, look, it's not this time, but a time is coming when persecution is just going to be the norm. And like, I think this is, I don't know if he says die. I think he says give up your life. But he's like, if you're gonna follow me, you're gonna learn what it is to give up your life as I do, something like that.
Yeah, he says you will follow in my footsteps, and there is a direct yet phrased in such a way you could have heard it in a lot of ways, but there is a reference to death, like to give up your life,
right,
or to lay your life down, and it's particularly the phrase "follow in my footsteps" that I liked. And
yeah.
At one point in that conversation, is it Nathaniel the right character? They're talking about having to do all these things, and Nathaniel says one of my favorite lines in 3 Seasons. He says, he kind of looks at himself and he says, I don't feel any different. Did I miss a ceremony?
Oh yeah.
And he says, I don't feel any different. And Jesus' words, I don't need you to feel anything in order to do big things. And I was like, that is and that's not to discount feelings or the proper place of any of that stuff, but so much so, like, I think we so often attach whether or not our spirituality is authentic, we're alive and vibrant and full of power and the spirit because we feel it. And I loved that line. I thought it was so good.
So it is kind of a heavy moment. Like, I think, there's a couple ways that you could interpret it. I'm certain that the disciples, I mean, as we see throughout the Gospels, like Jesus is telling them multiple times that he's going to die, and they really don't quite grasp that until later. So it doesn't surprise me that they're phrasing it this way and just kind of like slowly building into it. I'm sure we're going to get a more direct statement from Jesus about this in the future. But I think everyone's like, okay, all right. And they're just kind of like resting on the fact that Jesus says, this trip's going to be fine. Like, we don't have anything to worry about it. So then they're talking about the money situation, and Simon nominates Matthew to be their treasurer, their keeper of the, I don't know, bookkeeper necessarily, keeper of the purse. That's what I was looking for.
Yep.
Keeper of the purse. And Matthew's like, no way, I'm not doing that. I don't want to have anything to do with the money. I nominate Judas. And Judas is very surprised by this. At some point in the conversation, he acknowledged that he's very new. So I think, the fact that he's getting responsibility so quickly was a surprise to him. But everyone agrees, like, yeah, that'll be fine. Matthew endorses his skills in that way, and so everyone agrees. And then Jesus goes and assigns the pairs, and that is a fun conversation. Like, I guess, and this makes sense. Like, Z did not even know until after he had already been paired with Matthew that Matthew was a former tax collector, and so there's quite a bit of like, wait a second, what? He was? And then Jesus goes into this big conversation about like, it doesn't matter what you did before. Like, you've been called now, you're in a different spot, and like, that's going to be fine. Like, and he sends them on the farthest journey. They're going to have plenty of time to talk through their relative beliefs about society and whatever.
I didn't mind how they wrote that in there at all. I think it's probably unlikely that somebody would have ever joined the Havurah, and the back murmuring would never have contained the fact that Matthew used to be, that your late night chats around the campfire, nobody mentioned the stigma of Matthew's past. But I mean,
it was a pretty big plot point earlier on, and I think Z just came after that. And so,
a little bit.
I
mean, not a whole lot. I mean, he's not the last disciple to have joined. He's been there for quite a while, but
right.
And I, the other character point that I appreciate personally, is they're not taking the opportunity to demonize Judas. Like, you don't get a sense that Judas, like when he accepts the role as treasurer or any of these conversations, you don't get this like, oh, he's the slimy betrayer. He is in this for himself. You can see the danger of who he is. You can see the danger of the personality points coming together, but you are sensing a genuine, like, he is really wanting to be a part of this for all the right reasons. And I personally like that character development for the Judas character. I really like how it'd be easy for them to jump on and just kind of dramatically make it to where, he's got that little twinkle in his eye, and they're not doing that. And I like that.
Yeah, they started to, lay some breadcrumbs in the last episode about how Judas is misguided about what Jesus is doing. And, that's going to...
He can join the list of the other 11 guys that are misguided.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I think as long as he continues to have, the blinders about that, to read Jesus's words in the way that he wants to, I mean, that's the thing about Jesus is saying he's going to die, and they don't really get it until he actually dies. And then they all scatter.
Yep.
After it happens. So, it's not,
yep.
Each of them has their own way where they're dealing with this. And unfortunately, Judas, ultimately picks a way that's not good, but he's just human. He's got his own lenses that he's seeing the world through. He's got, all this stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely appreciate how they're showing us who he is in this way that is, I think, pretty realistic.
Agreed.
So then, as they start to disperse, we see Eden is upset about Simon having to leave again, or it seems that that's what's going on. Thomas goes and speaks to Jesus about Ramah, and this is where they have the conversation. And Jesus is like, "Yeah, I intentionally sent you in a particular direction for that reason. Go ahead." And he doesn't give him a formal blessing or anything like that at that point. I don't know what we're going to see with that later, but yeah, Jesus is definitely on board with it. So then outside, Thomas finds Ramah and shares his new mission and where he's going to go, and he's going to stop and see her father. And she's like, I should go too. Really, he's a complicated situation. I should probably mediate that thing. And Thomas is like, hey, I'm willing to do this on my own. I'm willing to follow our customs. And she's just insistent, no, I'm going to go too, because I want this operation to be successful. So we'll see their relationship play out throughout this season and into the future, I'm sure. Then we have little James finding Jesus and starts to ask him about why he hasn't been healed. And
goodness, what a scene.
Yeah.
Sheesh. I don't know if that one gets you like the reconciliation scenes do, but my wife heard me listening to it and came in to watch that scene while I took notes. That's just such a tricky scene to do.
Yeah.
The whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, whose opinion actually matters on this scene would be somebody that does live with a disability, or, I think about our conversations with Kevin in the past or something. How do they feel? Because that's going to be a hard scene to do, where you don't trivialize that lack of ability. You don't act like it's not that big of a deal. You don't do it in a way that's so hurtful. And I think they've probably done it well. I can't speak to that, but that would be, what a scene, a powerful scene, but a tricky scene to do. And I didn't think they over spiritualized it. There was a really very real connection about the very practical realities, and yet, the spiritual triumph. I just thought it's a scene. They had quite a bit of references to the book of James, by the way. I don't know if you caught all those, but
I was thinking that's what they were doing, but I wasn't so
Yeah. And see, that's what's I'm in love with it. I don't know if they're insinuating anything, because here's the deal. They are not taking my personal opinion. I wouldn't expect them to. It's a very unpopular opinion about who the James is in the James, John, and Peter, James, and John. We've talked about that a lot in the podcast, where I think it's not James and John, sons of Zebedee. I have to ignore the references in Matthew to hold that position. Anyway, you can even link my addendum video for that if you want to in the show notes for that, Brent. So they're not taking my position. I wouldn't expect them to. It's not all that popular. It's the most historically plausible in my mind, but it's not the most popular opinion. But if you don't take my opinion, then usually you believe that James, the brother of Jesus, the actual half-brother of Jesus, is the leader of the Jerusalem church, and therefore the author, and usually the author of the book of James. And I feel like they keep quoting the book of James, not quoting the book of James, but Like, there are a lot of Book of James references to whenever little James is in The Chosen. And I feel like they're hinting at him being the author of the Book of James, which, if you're not going to take my position on the triumvirate, I'm at least just ecstatic that you are making him the author of the Book of James. I think that's juicy and awesome and brilliant. But I don't know if they'll ever tie that together by the time the season is over, and or not the season, but the whole series is over. But I love those little nuggets. I'm like, that's just so good. So good.
Well, and we've had the flash forwards where we see Matthew writing his gospel, where we see John writing his gospel. So I could totally see a flash forward where we see James writing his letter.
Yeah, I keep waiting for the kind of the closing in the season 7 or something to do a lot of that. But who knows? We'll see what they've got up their sleeves. I trust them.
Maybe they'll have a season 8, huh?
I'd be down for that.
Yeah, the amount of work that they're putting into this, I don't know. Like, I think it would be very reasonable to have some time of rest after that, but we'll see. But yeah, Jesus he talks about, like, look, what kind of a testimony, like most people need some kind of healing to believe in me. But if you can believe in me without having that healing, like, how much more powerful is that? What is that? The Gezerah Shiva? How much more?
Oh no, the Kal Vachomer.
Kal Vachomer. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and so it's complicated because Jesus does ask him, like, do you want to be healed? I
appreciated that. He asked, and like, there was a conversation about consent, and I really appreciated that, to be honest.
Because James has never asked him before at this point.
Yeah, right.
Like, he's talked about it with the other disciples, and the other disciples have asked him about it, certainly. But he's never actually asked Jesus. And so, Jesus says, do you want to be healed? Which is a contrast to Kevin, where Kevin was in that church and he wasn't looking for that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And they try to force it on him.
Yep.
So, like,
we should probably link that episode now in the show notes. Put that one in there too. Got some good show notes today, everybody.
Yeah. So much for this sabbatical time of session 7. We're keeping people busy with Chosen, and we're keeping people, they're going to have to go watch your whole Kingdom series and
there you go.
Catch up on old episodes. I love it. But yeah, it's a complicated thing. And like, Jesus says, like, you're going to be healed at some point, but he doesn't promise when that's going to be or what that's going to look like, or whether it's even going to be in this present life on earth. Like, it's,
he seems to hint at it'll come after this side of death, or after, on the other side of death. But man, there's at one point James says, I'm just not like all these other disciples. Like, they're amazing at everything, and I just kind of suck. And Jesus' statement, which is stern and compassionate, I don't ever want to hear that again.
But the others, there's so much more. So much more what? I don't know. Stronger? Better at this?
James, I love you. But I don't want to hear that ever again.
I've kind of carried that statement with me. That little clip that video clip in my brain, because I can see the actual person of the resurrected Jesus saying that to me when I have those negative self-talk moments.
Yeah.
And he talks about himself as a burden. And then Jesus points out, like, there are things that the Father cares about, and then there are things that the Father doesn't care about. So you don't look good when you walk, so you could never run a marathon. These are not the things that matter, but that you are a person of goodness and integrity and compassion. Like, these are the things that the Father cares about. I loved that.
Great conversation.
Yep.
Okay. So then we have Matthew. He's kind of moving through the streets at night, which seems kind of funny, but then we realize he's actually going to his old house. He runs into Gaius outside of that, and Gaius is asking him what he's doing, and Matthew's like, oh, some people are going to stay here, and he's like, oh, we patrol this area. I can keep an eye on them for you. And then the other disciples arrive, and Matthew reassures them that everything's fine, and then Gaius kind of takes off, and Simon starts sharing some thoughts. He's encouraging everyone, and they recite Psalm 3 together.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like everyone was reciting it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they'd been like, if that's something they've been working on together or whatever, but they were all, they all grouped up. But,
Yep.
Simon has them all stand in the pairs that they're going out with. And it's just like, we gotta be comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
It's a good scene.
Good scene, good closing, good episode. Yeah, I think that James scene's one of my favorite of the season and probably one of my favorite of the whole thing so far. So I love it.
Okay, here's a little thought exercise for you, Marty.
Okay.
To close out our episode.
Oh boy.
If you were pairing up the disciples, how would you do it differently, perhaps?
There were some connections that I liked that they made, like the Simon and the Matthew connection. I don't know if I would have necessarily paired them together, but I liked that a lot.
Simon Z.
Yeah. Z and Matthew.
Yeah.
And then there's like how I view the disciples historically, and then there's how the Chosen is like portraying the characters too. So
well, sure, yeah. I mean, it's all on the table, Marty. You look at this however you want to look at it.
I mean, I would have. Man, I don't know. There's so many ways I could do it. I'm not Jesus, Brent. I mean, I think I would break up the Bethsaida boys on purpose. I think I'm going to send people with those tensions. I do appreciate in the Chosen scene how they chose not to like just do 6 pairs of opposites. They like there was some humor involved with Big James and Little James.
Right. Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
And I can tell you, as somebody who does wedding photography with another guy named Brent, we definitely make it a thing.
Big Brent and Little Brent.
No, we don't do that. What do we do? I mean, it's usually just Brent 1 and Brent 2, but
yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh, Brent squared," and we're like, "Yeah, haha, we've never heard that before."
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
It's great.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other clever. I mean, I would have done the same thing. See, I view Judas differently than the Chosen. I think he's probably a zealot. I would have probably paired him up with, like a Thaddeus or not Thaddeus as he's depicted in the Chosen, but maybe my own mental Herodian with a tax collector. I'd pair up Pharisees and Herodians, or I love the Essing component. I don't know who I would send them with. I do love the I don't know. I would have broken up John's disciples for sure. I would have broken people up, make us learn how to work together, bring a testimony of diversity. That's what I would have done.
Yeah. At first I was a little disappointed that Philip and Andrew got paired up.
Yep.
Because I was like, well, that's not going to be a challenge for them. But I think that's just Jesus knowing where his disciples are at in that moment. Like Andrew's pretty freaked out. Like he's talked to John. He's gotten some reassurance, but he's still like,
yep.
He's like, oh, are you sure? Like, what if we end up like John? What if we end up in prison?
Yep.
So I think Jesus is just like recognizing where each of them are at and what they need. And like Andrew needs some comfort and assurance at this point because he's, on the edge of losing his mind, basically.
Well, and that's going to come back too in the later episodes this season. So can't get ahead of ourselves, but I mean, that's going to be relevant, that impulse you had. So, okay.
Well, we'll close down this episode then. Another great episode, another great discussion. Lots of text in this one. I think, what was I saying earlier? So Psalm 139 and Job 1 came up in the conversation with little James.
Yep.
I wrote down Isaiah 35, and I don't remember where that was. Oh, it's the reference to the lame will leap like a deer.
Yes.
Is that in the same conversation, or is that?
I think that's in the James. I think that's in the James conversation.
That is in the James one too. Okay. Yeah, and so then, of course, the Psalm 3, and then the whole commissioning and sending of the disciples, like, really a pretty text-heavy episode.
Yep.
When you break it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, good stuff. You can go to BayModestDiscipleship.com to find those show notes, all sorts of videos and things to check out in this case. You can find groups there. You can find any events that might be happening. I mean, not really any events during Marty's sabbatical, but... although we were talking about the possibility of me doing some kind of a Q&A style thing, maybe with Brian or something, maybe less. I mean, I can answer some Bible questions, but not like Marty can. But we're thinking about some things like that. So all that stuff's on the events page. Everything's at the website, and then of course the most important, the contact page, where no matter when you're listening to this, that will give you the best way to get in touch with us. So thanks for joining us on the Bama Podcast. We will talk to you again soon.